In reality, I've talked to a lot of Canadians. I will be the first to admit I still don't fully understand.
Capital gains tax is back in the news. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today we've got that old capital gains tax on primary residences. Turns out the Liberals have been secretly tracking this. We've also got LNG back in the news. We've got Trump tariffs as we're getting towards that deadline. We're also learning of Canadian diplomats getting fired for corruption. So let's jump into this. Starting this one off, we got this one from Table Salt. Says Poilievre was right again. He was right about inflation, LNG to Europe, and now the Americans have beat us to it. They stand to benefit almost $1 trillion. This is coming from LNG. This one here, Pierre Poilievre promises to revive $14 billion Quebec LNG project the province quashed last year. And tying in with that, we've got this one here. Game, set, match. The Americans have been building LNG terminals for decades. And that's what we're seeing here in this map, one up in Alaska and a bunch on the southern coast here. Where are Canada's LNG export terminals? We have one now over here. That's it. It's embarrassing. We have resources we can sell to the world and we're not selling them. Pierre Poilievre responding to this one. Why did Carney advise Trudeau against LNG exports? That's savage. Now the Americans eat our lunch and we are losing hundreds of billions, despite the theater Liberals' elbows have been down for a very long time. Carney is a fraud. Everything about him is a lie. Couldn't have said it any better. Got the pleb sharing this one. Household debt as a share of GDP. There's Canada at the top, 103%. This is not good. We want to be on the bottom of this list. When first is last. This one coming from Blacklock's reporter here. 22 Canadian diplomats fired. 22 fired last year for fraud, theft, embezzlement, soliciting kickbacks, and other wrongdoings, according to the Department of Foreign Affairs figures. No police were called. Why weren't the police called? Because embezzlement is totally fine when the government does it. The department counted 218 complaints of wrongdoing last year that resulted in 125 separate investigations. So you can see it right here on this chart. 22 people fired, termination. And you can see all the other ones here. 42 people written, reprimand, temporary suspension 22, training and coaching 11. Coaching? Anyone caught doing any of these things, fraud, theft, embezzlement, soliciting kickbacks, needs to be fired and their pensions need to be stripped. This corruption needs to be punished. These people need to be in jail. Got this one from the Bank of Canada. So they're holding their rate at 2.75%. They're not dropping the rate.
At this rate decision, there was a clear consensus to hold our policy rate unchanged. We also agreed that we need to proceed carefully with particular attention to the risks and uncertainties facing the Canadian economy. If a weakening economy puts further downward pressure on inflation and the upward price pressures from trade disruption are contained, there may be a need for a reduction in the policy interest rate. So far, the global economic consequences of U.S. trade policy have been less severe than feared. In Canada, we had robust growth in the first quarter of 2025, mostly because firms were rushing to get ahead of tariffs. In the second quarter, the economy looks to have contracted as exports to the United States have fallen sharply, both as payback for the pull forward and because tariffs are dampening U.S. demand for our goods.
So basically, yeah, Americans not buying our goods as much because there's tariffs on them. And then Canadians bought a whole bunch of stock trying to weather the storm, artificially inflated our GDP. So Tiff Macklin also asked about Doug Ford's comments. Doug Ford absolutely pissed off, saying that he needs to reduce the rate immediately. He tweeted that out earlier today.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford has just come out and said that he is shocked by this decision and he is calling on the bank to cut interest rates now. How would you respond to that?
Well, I haven't seen his comments, but look, we take our decisions independently of the political process. We take them based on our best judgment as to the interest rate setting that will fulfill our mandate. And I think I would underline that the experience of the last few years has really highlighted just how much Canadians don't like inflation. We will support the economy through this period of upheaval, but at the same time, we are going to make sure that an inflation problem, a tariff problem, does not become an inflation problem.
I beg to differ. I think Liberals like inflation. They keep voting for it. Inflation caused by Liberal spending, not even a real country. Canada is a tax farm. What an absolutely dumb statement. Canadians have very low tolerance for inflation. Duh, no kidding, genius. Next up from Table Salt, this is an absolute bombshell. It says, documents I've obtained reveal that the government of Canada is keeping tabs on how much they could collect if they charged a capital gains tax on your primary residence. The figure suggests $13 billion per year they could raise this way. So we're seeing that here, non-taxation of capital gains on principal residences. Now, this is very interesting. As he says right here, they actually record it as a cost on their ballot sheet, like they're doing you a favor or it's a limited time promo or something. They record this as a cost to the government, not charging us capital gains on primary residences. They are going to flip this. I predict if Mark Carney stays in power for multiple years, this is going to change. They are going to start charging Canadians capital gains on primary residence. They flip-flopped on so many of their policies. What stops them from doing it here? The Liberals can walk on water at this point. Canadians can't see through the Trump fog. If they think there's a housing shortage now, imagine people who have to move to work. Devastating. Canada is a tax farm. I hope the premiers stop this. We already pay property tax. I mean, really, if people buy property and then you have to keep paying a tax on something you own. What if you had to pay a tax on your car every year, even though it's paid off? What if you had to keep paying taxes on a surfboard or on skis? Oh, you got that ski tax. Even though you own the skis, you got to pay an extra $10 a year just to own skis. I mean, that's essentially what property taxes. It's ridiculous. I get we have to pay for our roads and infrastructure and all our stuff. The thing is, the government's wasting so much money. We really should get rid of all that nonsense spending, wasteful consultants, foreign aid, all of it, and then see where we lie. And can we reduce property tax? Can we reduce GST? All that stuff, because GST and those taxes were brought in for the WW event. The greed runs deep with these Liberals, and I anticipate this is going to be put on the table at some point. Moving ahead, we've got a couple tweets here from Donald Trump. This one saying August 1st, a great day for America. We've also got this one, the August 1st deadline. Is the August 1st deadline, it stands strong and will not be extended, a big day for America. So Donald Trump not extending this. Mark Carney has to make a deal here in the next 24 hours, or Canadians will once again suffer some more. But once again, Mark Carney doesn't care because his investments aren't in Canada. Once again, we've got U.S. Ambassador Pete Hoekstra, who says he doesn't understand why there's so much anti-American frustration coming from Canadians. I find this a little baffling, actually.
Do you understand why some Canadians are upset with your president when he talks about the 51st state, and why some of them don't want to travel, why provinces are banning it? Do you understand why?
In reality, I've talked to a lot of Canadians, and I will be the first to admit I still don't fully understand how personal and how aggressive some Canadians have become on this issue. Okay, so no, I don't fully understand it.
Well, we don't understand it either when you got all these crazy people spray painting Tesla dealerships and doing all that nonsense, the radical left. But he should understand that Donald Trump saying he wants to invade us and take us over, that obviously scared a bunch of Canadians, even though it was just aggressive negotiation tactics. This is the art of the deal, guy. This is what Donald Trump does. Was it a good strategy? No, because it's damaged the relationship between Canada and America. The trust is gone. And it's pissed off a bunch of Canadians because they lost their jobs. Big sectors, steel, aluminum, auto, copper.
I understand that those feelings exist. They're part of my reality, but they don't really exist on the other side of the border. Americans are not banning the sale of Canadian products into America. I've asked a lot of places, what's American tourism doing? And they say, it's the same, if not up this year. Americans still love Canada. We're coming here. We're spending American dollars in Canada because we view Canada as a friendly country. And even though, we both have warts, okay?
The difference is here, there wasn't a prime minister saying that they're going to invade America. It's just an insulting thing to say. So I don't know why he doesn't understand that, but that's why Canadians are pissed off.
Don't like the 51st state? Guess what? We didn't like it that you didn't pay for NATO for years, but that didn't stop us from coming to Canada or
That's not a fair comparison. One's a full-blown invasion, the other one's being a bit of a freeloader. And yes, we were freeloading. It's different than saying we're going to come and take you over.
Evaluating Canadian products based on their merit and their value.
You recently did spark some controversy on this when you said, there are reasons President Trump and his team refer to Canada as mean and nasty to deal with. Do you stand by those comments, or do you regret those at all?
No, I mean, I'm quoting the President of the United States. I'm quoting my boss. Do I regret quoting my boss? No, I support my boss. Absolutely.
Is it hard to work for your boss when he says some of the things he says, and you're supposed to be a diplomat?
You know what I like about Donald Trump is Donald Trump makes very clear where he's going and what his objectives are. He wants prosperity for the American people. He wants security and stability. He wants a strong, Western world militarily. He wants to end the killing in Ukraine. He wants peace and stability in the Middle East. You know exactly where he's going. Someone asked yesterday, is there any flexibility in his strategy? Yes, he knows where he's going, and if a strategy is not working, he's more than willing to adjust the strategy, but he's not adjusting the end point. Just saying, okay, I've had a strategy in place. I'm not getting the results that I want. Okay, I'll try some other way to get there.
Pete Huckster, U.S.
So he's kind of revealed his cards here a little bit of why he doesn't understand why Canadians are so upset. It's because he knew the whole time the 51st state rhetoric was just rhetoric. It was just negotiation speak. He knew that from the start. I'm sure Donald Trump told them that, said, there's no way, we're not going there to invade them. I'm just going to spook them a little bit with this. He knew that, and that's why he doesn't understand it. On the other side of it, those polls showing like 80% of Canadians were very much bothered by that 51st state rhetoric. Canadians didn't know if it was truthful or not. They didn't know if it was negotiation speak or not, and they felt threatened in their own country. That's why it was not a good tactic, because now it has destroyed the relationship, the trust between the countries. Canada's obviously a sinking ship of corruption. No one takes it serious anymore. Sad days indeed. It is a sinking ship of corruption. Moving over to CBC, we've got this guy here calling it straight on the dairy cartel. Why are we going to trade prosperity in numerous industries just for the dairy industry?
Well, yeah, I mean, if it's held us up over supply management, then I think we deserve to know that and have a conversation about that. I mean, is it worth jeopardizing the billions in other ag exports to the United States in order to protect this one small sector of the overall ag sector? And I think that's a conversation that maybe needs to take place. I mean, the timing, of course, of Bill C-202, this law that sort of protects supply management and trade talks, seem very ill-conceived, especially given that the Americans have identified this, I think legitimately so, as a trade irritant. So again, it gets back to this whole question. I mean, are things going sideways because of supply management? And if so, maybe Canadian leaders need to be upfront with us. If there are other issues here, then fine. And if the Americans are being unreasonable in some respect, then I guess we have to respond to that. But yeah, ultimately, is this a big sticking point here? I think that's a fair and important question.
That's funny. Maybe Canadian leaders should be upfront with us. Yeah, that's never going to happen. Finally, at least someone questions Carney. Protecting millionaires that rig supply management system to allow them to continue to overcharge Canadians for dairy products. Why do a few niche industries benefit from this approach at the expense of the consumer? Everything else competes in a free market. So moving over to CTV here, Scott Reid has asked if he thinks we're going to get a deal.
Now, Carney and his cabinet will also be discussing U.S. trade negotiations this afternoon. Do you think we'll have a framework deal by Friday?
I wouldn't bet too much money in Canadian, American, or any other kind of dollars on that. I look at this as sort of a what if, what else, and what more cabinet meeting. What if we don't get a deal with Trump by Friday? What else might Trump do if we don't reach a deal? Might he add additional tariffs to other sectors and other industries? And what more do we need to do to protect our workers and our industries in the event that's where it ends up? You do not hear much enthusiasm. You do not hear much optimism around the state of these talks. It appears that the United States have dug in and said, there is no negotiation. You will take a terrible deal or no deal at all. And if you take no deal, we may punish you economically.
Are we prepared as a country if a deal is not reached?
It really depends on what that means. So if it just feels like we pass through the deadline and talks continue and, there are no new tariffs applied, but there's just some rhetoric from the White House, then sure, I think we'll manage it as a country, as industry workers. But if Trump reacts in a peak of temper, if we can't get a deal, and Trump decides that the response to that is to assault our economy, to punish and bully us, and to show that if we do not do what he wants and precisely the way he wants it, that he will inflict harm on us, well, then I do think the country is going to go through a bit of a wrenching awakening. And it's not.
This shouldn't come as a surprise, though. He's been very clear what's going to happen if we don't make a deal. Why is it that the EU is able to make a deal in 1 hour and Carney can't make a deal in 3 months? That's the real question. Why is Scott not asking that question?
Like, people haven't been paying close attention to this issue for months, but it could get a lot more challenging. That's not just for the government. That could be for a lot of us.
Now, the EU and the U.S. have made a trade deal. When you see what the EU got, or in this case didn't get, how concerned are you about Canada?
You know, the harder you look at this deal, the more you just say, this is all such a complete exercise in theater. I mean, they have these phantom commitments that somehow the EU, which doesn't actually control expenditures by member states, doesn't control what France, what French industry, what German industry, what they purchase from the United States, massive commitments of billions of dollars that will be purchased from the United States. Written smoke doesn't mean a thing. And then, of course, Trump applying a
optics and diplomacy matter. They shook on it. There's energy agreement, billions of dollars of purchasing. It's showing the rest of the world that Trump's making deals. Whether they fully follow through on that or not is yet to be seen. But once again, why can't Mark Carney make a deal after 3 months? Why did he enshrine supply management in law just before the negotiations? Why isn't Scott Reed asking these questions? Does he benefit from supply management too? Is that why he's not speaking up on this? Or is he just protecting his boss?
15% across the board tariff on the EU, that is injurious. But on the other hand, it's only going to slow investment in the United States and raise the price of everything in the United States. If that's the kind of template that Trump is insisting here, and if he were to say, I want a 15% tag across the board, independent of the Canada-U.S. Mexico free trade agreement, then we couldn't agree to that. That would be impossible for us to agree. It'd be better for Canada to have that imposed in violation of our treaty rather than to somehow surrender and accept it. But again, if you tell him no, how does Trump react? Not a man who likes being told no. So the EU deal is not much of an indication. It's clearly not a template that we could accept, but it may be a template and a model for what Trump will insist on.
We don't get to dictate the terms, though, and considering our country is full of so much corruption and the U.S. knows about it to the point where they kicked out our CBSA officers out of the rooms because we were so infiltrated by China, this isn't a situation where we get to call the shots. They call the shots because they're the big economy we rely on, not the other way around. We should be cleaning up our crap and our corruption, the street fennel, all of that crap in our country. That should be at the top of the list, saying we are going to clean up the corruption in this country. We're going to buy American military stuff. We're going to buy other American exports, jets, whatever it may be, and lay out a big deal showing we're going to clean up our country. We are not a squeaky clean country. Canada is full of rampant corruption. It's right to the top in our government. How many scandals have we seen in the last 10 years? Justin Trudeau is the most ethics violation of any prime minister in Canadian history, and Mark Carney is quickly following behind him here. Mark Carney's so invested in America. How is he even a Canadian PM? Once again, though, Scott Reed protecting his boss doesn't criticize what's actually going on here.
This feels like a shakedown. Is that what this is, Scott?
Absolutely. And you know, unfortunately, here's the ugly truth is that his Trump's leverage has increased because he secured this deal with the EU and he can trumpet that he's a winner there. And then he's secured deals with Japan and a few other Asian countries. So we can turn to Canada and say, listen, you know what? My phone is on hold if you guys don't give me everything I want. Watch for the following. In the next 24 hours with Dominic LeBlanc, our point man down there in Washington, is there any potential for a breakthrough? And then there's one final card to be played, and that is a conversation between the Prime Minister and Trump. Trump does respect strength. He does respect the reputation of Carney. You've seen him give him a wide berth politically, demonstrate actual respect toward him, which he doesn't provide to everyone. And so
that respect is not translating to anything. Mark Carney hasn't made a deal. You call this a shakedown. Trump is negotiating. This is how he does it. This is the art of the deal guy. This shouldn't come as a surprise. This is how Trump negotiates aggressively. We should have rolled out the red carpet for him so he could have had an easy win. Now Canada's become this nasty, annoying country to deal with. Scott Reed is trying to paint Canada as some sort of victim here when really our corruption has been hurting America. This has been facilitated by our very government. We knew this stuff was coming. They have not been doing anything. The EU gets a deal in an hour and Mark Carney enshrines dairy into law, protecting it, showing he doesn't want to negotiate. Trump had to twist Canada's arm to get rid of the DST. These are not good negotiating tactics. Mark Carney is an awful negotiator. We could have grabbed any Canadian from any Canadian business, stuck them in the room with Donald Trump to negotiate and got a better result. Turns out if we had a career politician like Pierre Poilievre in this situation, he would have had more tools at his disposal. He understands the system better. He would have been able to do a much better deal with Trump. On top of that, Carney is not acting in Canada's best interest. He's not invested in this country. The Liberals knew what was coming. They have just chosen not to act.
Is there a possibility at the highest levels we could find some way to manage this deadline either secure a deal or at least secure some peace around a non-deal, that may very well come down to the Prime Minister and his telephone.
Okay, Scott, we will have to leave it there.
Bad takes from Scott Reed, protecting his boss. Scott Reed is a liberal shoe shiner. I'd rather take the pain than kiss the ring. You know, people leave these comments and they're not the ones who lost their jobs. Auto industry, steel, aluminum, copper, etc. Boycott everything USA and Carney we trust. Okay, so many clueless liberals here have no idea what's going on. You picked a losing horse. Carney sucks, no longer boycott American products. What I really hope comes from this is Donald Trump comes out and says, this is the reason why we're not getting a deal with Canada, and exposes what Mark Carney wouldn't negotiate and supply management, whatever else it may be, and just expose the corruption to the rest of Canada. That's what I really hope happens.